The scent of honey and roasted fish still hung in the air, mixing with the fading perfume of white roses. Sarah, pulling her coat tight, paused at the door. The dinner was cute, Hank, really cute. Her words were a whisper, but they cut through the quiet kitchen like a knife. But I'm going out with my boyfriend now. The front door clicked shut, leaving me in the silence. The untouched plates on the table, and the cold reality of her confession. Hank, a marketing man, prepared Sarah's favorite meal. Honey-glazed salmon, wild rice, and white roses. He hoped this meticulously planned dinner would mend the growing distance between them. Sarah arrived, elegantly dressed in a new black dress, her hair and makeup done. She constantly checked her phone, barely acknowledging Hank or the meal. Hank's initial pride in the dinner faltered when Sarah called it cute. She announced she had plans to celebrate an account with friends from work. Hank questioned her formal attire for what sounded like casual work drinks. Sarah became defensive and dismissive, her tone hardening notably. Her phone buzzed, and a genuine smile, absent for months, lit her face. Hank recognized her telltale signs, the lip biting and the sparkle in her eye. He asked about the text, observing a brief flicker of panic in Sarah's expression. Anger replaced her panic, and the argument quickly escalated. Hank felt foolish, realizing the effort he had invested was now wasted. Sarah grabbed her keys, firm on not canceling her supposed plans. As she headed for the door, Hank posed one last question. Is there something you want to tell me? Sarah turned, her face cold and distant, delivering the devastating truth. Her words, "I'm going out with my boyfriend now," left Hank completely stunned. The phrase, "my boyfriend," echoed in the sudden, crushing silence. Tuesday evening arrived with the promise of a turning point. I had spent the better part of the afternoon meticulously preparing. Honey-glazed salmon, Sarah's absolute favorite, lay cooling on the counter. Wild rice, fragrant with herbs, steamed gently in a pot. A vase of white roses, crisp and new, sat centered on the small dining table, their scent a clean counterpoint to the rich aromas from the kitchen. I was 34, a marketing man, still believing in grand gestures, even small ones like this. Things had felt off for months, a slow, insidious drift. I called it a rough patch, a term people used when they hoped things would simply fix themselves. Tonight, I thought, might be the night we started fixing it. The clock on the kitchen wall read 6:45 when her key turned in the lock. Sarah stepped in, framed by the late afternoon light fading behind her. She wore a new black dress, a silky thing that shimmered under the recessed lights, clinging in all the right places. Her hair was up, styled in a way I hadn't seen in months, and her makeup was heavier than usual, accentuating her eyes. My proud smile, the one I had practiced in the mirror while arranging the roses, faltered a little. She held her phone, her thumb already scrolling, barely looking up as she shed her coat. "Hey," she said, her voice a little breathless, her gaze still fixed on the screen. "Something smells good." "It's your favorite," I managed, gesturing towards the table, where the candles were lit, casting a warm glow. "Salmon." She finally looked up, her eyes flicking over the table, the roses, the plates. Her lips curved, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Hank, that's cute." She said the word cute like it was something you'd say about a child's drawing, not a thoughtful meal. Then her attention drifted back to her phone. "Listen, I actually can't stay." My stomach tightened. "Can't stay? I thought we were having dinner." "I know," she said, a quick, dismissive wave of her hand. "But something came up. Friends from work. We landed that big account, you know? They're celebrating." She didn't look at me, still engrossed in whatever buzzed on her screen. "Friends from work," I repeated, the words tasting flat. "For work drinks? You're dressed like that?" I gestured vaguely at her dress, the careful hair. It seems like overkill for a casual celebration with colleagues. She finally met my gaze and her expression hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Her voice, usually soft, now had an edge, unfamiliar and sharp. "Are you implying something, Hank?" "No," I said, a little too quickly. "It's just, this is all very sudden. You didn't mention it." "It was sudden," she retorted, her jaw tight. "They just organized it. What do you want me to do? Turn them down? It's important for my career." Just then her phone buzzed again, a short, sharp vibration. She glanced down and a genuine smile, one I hadn't seen directed at me in months, lit up her face. Her eyes sparkled and she bit her lower lip, a nervous habit I knew all too well. It was one of her tells, a sure sign of excitement, or maybe something more. My gut tightened into a knot. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice coming out flatter than I intended. Panic flickered in her eyes for a split second, a quick, almost imperceptible shift, before anger took over. "It's none of your business, Hank," she snapped, her voice rising. "Why are you being like this? I told you, it's work." "Right," I said, the word heavy with sarcasm I hadn't meant to inject. I felt a fool standing there, the carefully laid table, the cooling salmon, the hopeful roses. All of it felt stupid and small now. She marched into the living room, grabbing her keys from the bowl by the door. "I'm not canceling my plans, Hank. Not for this." She didn't specify what this was, but I assumed she meant the dinner, the quiet evening I'd planned to save us. As she reached for the doorknob, I heard myself speak, the words almost a plea. "Is there something you want to tell me, Sarah?" She paused, her hand on the cold brass. She turned, her face a mask, distant and colder than I'd ever seen it. Her eyes, usually so warm, held no discernible emotion. Then she spoke, her voice calm, utterly devoid of feeling. "The dinner was cute, Hank. Really cute. But I'm going out with my boyfriend now." The front door clicked shut, the sound sharp and final. I stood in the silence of the kitchen, the words "my boyfriend" echoing in the suddenly vast, empty space. "Your what?" The words felt foreign in my mouth, thick and clumsy. I must have croaked them out, because Sarah, still poised with her hand on the doorknob, let out a soft, impatient sigh. She didn't turn fully, just a slight twist of her head, her profile sharp in the dim hallway light. Her expression was a mix of annoyance and something else I couldn't quite decipher. A flicker of boredom, perhaps. "My boyfriend Hank," she repeated, her voice flat, as if she were explaining something obvious to a slow child. My mind struggled to catch up. Boyfriend. The word hung in the air, heavy and absurd. We were married. We had a house, a shared life, a dog. A boyfriend, I finally managed, the initial shock giving way to a cold, hard knot in my chest. "You have a boyfriend? While you're married to me?" She finally turned, her gaze meeting mine, and I saw no remorse there, only a weary resignation. "For now," she said, almost a whisper, but it landed like a stone. "For now." The phrase echoed, chilling me to the bone. It wasn't a denial, but a confirmation of intent. It spoke of a future she'd already mapped out, one that didn't include me. "How long?" The question came out sharper than I expected, a sudden burst of desperate curiosity. I needed the timeline, the precise dimensions of this betrayal. She sighed again, a sound of pure exasperation, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair. "Does it matter?" she challenged, but then seemed to think better of it. 3 months, roughly. 3 months. My mind reeled. 3 months of her late nights, those client dinners that stretched till 11. 3 months of my clumsy attempts to reconnect, buying her flowers, suggesting weekend trips, asking if she wanted to try that new restaurant. 3 months of her distracted replies, her phone always in hand, her eyes elsewhere. My efforts, my hopes, all built on a foundation of lies. It felt like a cruel joke, played out with my own naive trust. "What's his name?" I asked, the words forced through a suddenly tight throat. The name, I realized, would make it irrevocably real. She hesitated, a slight flicker in her eyes before she straightened her shoulders. "Chad Olson. He works at my firm." Chad Olson. The name was unremarkable, Midwestern ordinary. But the fact that he worked at her firm, that he'd been right there under my nose, made my stomach clench. "Chad Olson," I repeated, tasting the name, trying to place it, though I knew I never would have known him. It wasn't just late nights now. It was early mornings, coffee breaks, shared lunches, casual glances across the office, all the subtle intimacies that build between people who spend their days together. All the while I had been home, trusting. My mind raced, stitching together the fragments of the past 3 months. The new clothes, the sudden gym membership, the renewed interest in her appearance. I'd been happy for her, I'd thought. happy that she was finding herself again, invigorated by her career. I'd been a fool, a trusting, blind fool. "How old is he?" I asked, though a part of me didn't want to know. 28, she said, her voice flat. 28, 6 years younger than Sarah, nearly 10 years younger than me. That detail, too, twisted in the wound. A younger man? Had I grown old? Had I become boring? She took a step towards the door, clearly intending to leave, to escape this interrogation. But I moved, almost without thinking, blocking her path, not physically touching her, just stepping into the space, filling the doorway. "No," I said, my voice low. "No, you don't get to just walk out. What about our life? What about this house?" My arms swept out, encompassing the quiet home, the life we'd built over 7 years. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, and her expression was empty. "What about it, Hank?" Her voice was devoid of emotion. Do you love him?" The question felt like a desperate gasp for air. Her silence was the answer. A long, heavy silence that stretched between us, filling the small hallway, suffocating me. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. The absence of a denial was more damning than any confession. It was a confirmation of something profound, something irreversible. A sharp, searing pain shot through me. It wasn't just the betrayal of our marriage vows, not just the physical act of her being with someone else. It was the crushing weight of her betrayal of me, of my trust, of every shared moment, every whispered confidence, every quiet understanding we'd ever had. It was a betrayal of our past, making it all seem like a lie. We could try counseling," I suggested, the words a raw, desperate plea, clinging to the last shred of hope, however thin. "We could fix this, Sarah. We could talk to someone." She looked at me, and a short, humorless scoff escaped her lips. "It's too late for that, Hank." Her eyes were cold, distant, already somewhere else, with someone else. Then she simply pushed past me, opening the door and stepping out. The click of the lock resonated in the quiet kitchen, leaving me alone with the uneaten salmon, now cold on the table, the white roses still and beautiful, and my world utterly, irrevocably shattered. It wasn't just my wife I had lost. It was the life I thought I had, the future I had believed in, the very ground beneath my feet. Hank spends the night in a daze, sleeping on the couch, the uneaten dinner a bitter monument. Sarah returns late, slipping into bed silently, acting as if nothing had happened. The next morning unfolds in a surreal silence as she leaves for work. Hank struggles to focus at work, tormented by the replay of her confession. He calls his older brother Earl, known for his directness and practical advice. Earl, sensing Hank's profound distress, tells him to drive out to the family farm. Hank makes the long drive, the familiar cornfields a stark contrast to his inner turmoil. Earl listens patiently, offering whiskey and tough, no-nonsense counsel about getting a lawyer. Hank confesses a burning desire for revenge, wanting Sarah and Chad to face consequences. Earl cautions against impulsive actions, but acknowledges the underlying fury. They discuss the pragmatic aspects: property division, finances, and joint accounts. Hank feels a nascent sense of purpose, realizing he must shift from despair to decisive action. He begins to meticulously gather financial documents, statements, and emails. The house, once a comforting home, now feels like a tense battleground. The night after Sarah's confession passed in a daze. I stayed on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that offered no warmth against the chill settling in my bones. The dining table a few feet away remained untouched, the cold salmon and wild rice a bitter monument to a dinner that never was. The white roses, once a symbol of hope, now just mocked me from their vase. I didn't sleep, not really, just drifted in and out, the silence of the house amplifying the chaotic replay of her words. My boyfriend. Sometime in the small hours, I heard the faint click of the front door. Sarah. I heard her soft footsteps on the carpet, the rustle of clothes, the quiet creak of the bedroom door as she slipped inside. She didn't check on me, didn't say a word. She just went to bed as if she'd come home from any other late night, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't shattered my world just hours before. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. The next morning was equally surreal. I heard her moving around, the shower running, the clink of a coffee cup. I lay still on the couch, feigning sleep, unable to face her. She left for work as usual, the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway the only indication she had been there at all. The house settled back into an unnatural quiet, now tinged with a hollow emptiness. I tried to work, sitting in my home office, but the words kept replaying, a broken record in my head. Chad Olson, 28, my boyfriend. Every email, every spreadsheet, every marketing campaign idea felt pointless, meaningless. My gaze kept drifting to the framed photos on my desk. Sarah and me at the lake, Sarah and me on our wedding day, smiling, oblivious. It was all a lie, or at least a past that had been irrevocably tainted. By mid-morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't try to sugarcoat it. I called my older brother, Earl. He was a straight shooter, a farmer who still lived on the family land out near Sterling, 2 hours west. He didn't mince words, which was exactly what I needed. Hank, his voice was gravelly, the sound of years spent outdoors. You sound like hell. I am, I managed, the words catching in my throat. I told him briefly, clinically, what had happened. No drama, just the facts. Sarah, boyfriend, Chad Olson. A long silence stretched between us, punctuated by the faint sounds of his farm, a tractor perhaps, or a barking dog. All right, he finally said, his voice flat. Get in your car. Drive out here. We'll talk. The drive felt endless. 2 hours of open road, the familiar cornfields stretching out on either side, their green rows neatly ordered, unconcerned with the chaos in my head. The flat, expansive landscape was a stark contrast to the tight, suffocating space of my heartbreak. Every mile took me further from the city, further from Sarah, but not from the pain. Earl met me on the porch, a tall, sturdy man with lines etched around his eyes from years in the sun. He didn't offer sympathy, just a nod and a gesture towards the worn leather armchair in his living room. He poured us both a glass of amber liquid, whiskey, the good stuff. He listened patiently as I recounted the whole messy story, the cute dinner, the cold confession, the age of this Chad Olson. When I finished, the silence settled again, broken only by the crackle of the ice in our glasses. You gotta lawyer up, Hank, Earl said, his voice firm, unwavering. First thing tomorrow. Get somebody good. This ain't gonna be pretty. I want them to pay, Earl, I confessed, the words a raw, venomous whisper. I want her to pay for this, for him to pay. The desire for revenge was a hot, bitter taste in my mouth, a counterpoint to the hollow ache. Earl took a slow sip of his whiskey. Revenge is a fool's errand, son. Just makes things uglier. But I get it. You're hurt. You're furious. Don't do anything stupid. But you gotta protect yourself, your property, your money. He laid out the practicalities, the cold, hard facts of the situation. The house, the cars, the joint accounts, the retirement funds, all the tangled threads of a shared life that now needed to be unraveled. As he spoke, a flicker of something new ignited within me. Not hope, not yet, but purpose. A small, cold spark of resolve. Despair had been suffocating. Action, even the grim action of protecting my assets, felt like a necessary next step. I left Earl's farm with a new task. Back home, under the cover of night, I began to gather financial statements, old emails, property deeds, bank account details, every document I could find, quietly, meticulously. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground, and I was arming myself for a fight I never wanted. Hank, aided by Earl, begins to investigate Sarah's recent behavior patterns. He meticulously reviews their shared credit card statements, uncovering suspicious luxury purchases. Sarah's past work trips and late meetings now fall into place with chilling clarity. Hank confronts Sarah, not with rage, but with a calm presentation of factual evidence. Sarah initially denies, then deflects, eventually admitting to some expenditures with Chad. The discovery of a shared weekend retreat intensifies Hank's pain and resolve. Hank resorts to installing monitoring software on Sarah's work laptop as a desperate measure. He uncovers incriminating emails and messages between Sarah and Chad, detailing their relationship. Hank feels a profound sickness, but also a sense of empowerment from the undeniable evidence. He schedules an appointment with a divorce lawyer specializing in infidelity cases. The lawyer outlines strategies for an at-fault divorce and securing Hank's assets. Hank begins to transfer his portion of their joint savings into a new separate account. He changes the house locks, providing Sarah with a new key without a word. A silent, calculated conflict has now officially commenced, each move a strategic defense. With Earl's tough advice echoing in my head, I began to dig. Not haphazardly, but with a cold, methodical precision. I went through old statements, bank records, and credit card bills, focusing on the last 3 months, the timeline Sarah had given me. The patterns began to emerge, subtle at first, then glaring. Our shared credit card statements, usually a predictable chronicle of groceries and household expenses, now showed anomalies. A few high-end restaurant charges, well outside our usual rotation, and always on nights Sarah had claimed were late client dinners. A boutique hotel stay in Lake Geneva, a 2-hour drive from home, listed under weekend corporate training. That one hit me hardest. Sarah had described it as a mandatory, grueling 2-day seminar. I'd offered to pick her up, but she'd insisted on getting a ride with her colleague. Now the pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The late nights, the sudden work trips, her distracted demeanor. They weren't just excuses, they were carefully constructed lies, built on my trust. I waited until Sarah was home, sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. I walked in, holding the printed credit card statements. My hands steady. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. My voice was calm, almost detached. "Sarah," I said, holding out the statements, "can you explain these charges?" She looked up, her brow furrowed. She took the papers, her eyes scanning the dates and amounts. Initially, she tried to deny it, a quick shake of her head. "I don't know what these are, Hank. Work expenses, probably." Then she tried to deflect. "Why are you going through our statements? Don't you trust me?" The irony was not lost on me. "I'm looking for answers," I replied, my voice unwavering. "These aren't work expenses, Sarah, not without a corresponding reimbursement. And this hotel," I pointed to the Lake Geneva charge, "this was your corporate training, wasn't it?" Her shoulders slumped slightly. She bit her lip, that tell of hers I knew so well. "All right," she finally conceded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some of them were with Chad, just dinner mostly. And the weekend retreat?" My voice remained level, but inside a new wave of hurt washed over me. The thought of them, together, away from everything, planning their future, while I was here oblivious, felt like a physical blow. She didn't answer directly, just turned her head away. Her silence was a louder confession than any words. It was no longer just about a boyfriend. It was about shared weekends, intimacy, a life she was building with someone else, using our money, our shared resources. The hurt intensified, but it also solidified my resolve. A desperate measure took root in my mind. The next day after Sarah left for work, I went to her home office. Her work laptop, usually locked down tight, was left open on her desk. I had bought monitoring software online, a discrete program designed to record keystrokes and capture screenshots. It felt dirty, invasive, a violation of what was left of our privacy. But I justified it. She had already violated so much more. I installed it quickly, silently, feeling like a thief in my own home. The results came in quickly. Incriminating emails, private messages exchanged on a separate app I hadn't known about, all between Sarah and Chad. Declarations of love, intimate details, whispered plans for their future together. Their new life. It was all there, laid bare. I felt sick to my stomach, a profound nausea churning through me. But amidst the sickness, there was also a cold, hard sense of empowerment. I had the evidence. It was undeniable. I made an appointment with a lawyer Earl had recommended, a woman named Ms. Henderson, known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense approach to divorce cases involving infidelity. Her office was downtown, sleek and professional, a stark contrast to my unraveling life. Ms. Henderson listened patiently, her expression neutral as I laid out the story, presenting the credit card statements. The printouts of the emails and messages. She nodded, occasionally taking notes. This is strong evidence for an at-fault divorce, Mr. Miller, she stated, her voice calm and authoritative. We can argue for a greater share of the marital assets and potentially punitive damages for emotional distress, though that's harder to prove in Illinois. She outlined a strategy: securing my assets, documenting everything, and preparing for Sarah's inevitable counterclaims. The next few days were a blur of action. I went to the bank, transferred my half of our joint savings to a separate account in my name. It felt clinical, almost surgical, dividing a life that had once been so intertwined. I changed the locks on our shared home, a symbolic and practical act. When Sarah came home that evening, I handed her a new key without comment. She looked at it, then at me, her face unreadable. She took the key. No words were exchanged. The quiet warfare had begun, each action a calculated strike in my defense, each move aimed at protecting what was mine from the fallout of her betrayal. Hank, armed with irrefutable evidence, decides to confront Chad Olson directly at Sarah's workplace. He enters the marketing firm, loudly demanding to speak with Chad, creating a noticeable disturbance. Chad, appearing visibly pale and nervous, agrees to meet Hank in a secluded conference room. Hank presents the comprehensive evidence of the affair, including printed photos and emails. Chad initially attempts denial but quickly admits his involvement, offering a weak apology. Hank warns Chad to distance himself from Sarah, threatening legal action for alienation of affection. Chad, clearly concerned about his professional standing, promises to end his relationship with Sarah. Later, Hank formally serves Sarah with divorce papers, explicitly citing adultery as the grounds. Sarah reacts with fury, accusing Hank of vindictive and controlling behavior. Her lawyer challenges the at-fault divorce claim, but Hank's compiled evidence is robust. The legal proceedings become increasingly contentious, with both parties exchanging accusations. Hank feels the immense emotional strain, but maintains his resolve for justice and self-preservation. He considers the strategic option of revealing Chad's affair to his company's HR department. Earl reminds him to focus on the ultimate goal: building a new future, not just seeking revenge. The decision to confront Chad Olson at his workplace was a calculated one, fueled by a cold, simmering anger that had replaced my initial despair. I wasn't looking for a brawl. I was looking for leverage, a public exposure that would carry consequences. I printed out the most damning emails, the photos from their weekend retreat, and the credit card statements. This wasn't just my pain, it was evidence. I walked into the sleek, modern lobby of Sarah's marketing firm a few days later, my heart thumping a steady, hard rhythm. The receptionist, a young woman with a polite smile, asked if I had an appointment. "I need to speak with Chad Olson," I stated, my voice firm, allowing no room for negotiation. "It's personal." My tone, my very presence seemed to cause a ripple of unease. People glanced up from their cubicles, a low hum of curiosity starting. Chad appeared, looking pale and nervous, his eyes darting around the open-plan office. He was shorter than I'd imagined, younger, with that carefully styled haircut all young marketing men seem to favor. He gestured towards an empty conference room, clearly wanting to avoid a public scene. Inside, I didn't waste time. I placed the stack of papers on the polished table between us. "These are yours, aren't they, Chad?" I asked, my voice flat. The emails, the pictures from Lake Geneva, the credit card charges. He picked up a photo, his face draining of color. It was a clear shot of him and Sarah, laughing, arms around each other, on the resort patio. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his eyes avoiding mine. "Don't lie to me, Beth," I said, leaning forward slightly, keeping my voice low but sharp. "I have more. I have everything." Sarah admitted to it. Now you can admit it, or we can go back out there and discuss it with everyone in the office, including your HR department. He swallowed hard. His gaze fell to the table. "All right," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Yeah, it's true. I'm sorry, Hank." The apology felt weak, hollow, like an afterthought. "Sorry isn't going to cut it," I told him. "You stay away from my wife. You end whatever this is, or I will use every legal avenue available to me. I will sue you for alienation of affection. I will insure your company, knows exactly what kind of man you are. You understand? Chad nodded quickly, his eyes wide with fear. The threat of a ruined career clearly trumped any romantic notions he might have had. I'll break it off, he promised, his voice tight. I swear, I'll stay away from her. Satisfied for the moment, I left him there, alone with the evidence of his choices. Later that week, the divorce papers were served to Sarah. The primary cause cited was adultery, backed by the extensive documentation I had compiled. When she saw the papers, she erupted. Her fury was palpable, screaming accusations of vindictiveness, of controlling behavior, of trying to ruin her life. "You have no right to do this, Hank," she shrieked, her face flushed, her composure finally shattered. "You're trying to destroy me." "You destroyed us, Sarah," I replied, my voice calm, almost detached. The cold realism in that moment was profound. We were past the point of sentimentality. Her lawyer, a slick woman with an air of practiced aggression, tried to argue against the at-fault divorce, claiming it was an antiquated concept, an attempt at emotional manipulation. But my evidence was substantial. The emails, the credit card statements, Chad's own tacit admission. It was all there. The legal proceedings quickly became a messy, drawn-out affair. Accusations flew back and forth, turning our shared history into a battlefield of claims and counterclaims. I felt the strain, the relentless emotional toll of dissecting our life piece by piece, but my resolve remained firm. I had to protect myself. I had to seek some form of justice, however bitter. I discussed with Ms. Henderson the option of exposing Chad's affair to his company's HR department. She advised caution, explaining the potential blowback, the perception of vindictiveness. "But it's a card we can play, if necessary, Mr. Miller," she conceded, "to ensure he keeps his distance." "Remember the goal, Hank," Earl reminded me during one of our phone calls. "It ain't just about making them suffer, it's about getting you a new start. Don't let the anger blind you to that." It was a good point. Revenge was a hollow meal. A new beginning, however, now that was something worth fighting for. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Hank, after careful deliberation with his lawyer, sends an anonymous tip to Chad's HR department. Including all evidence, Chad's company initiates an internal investigation into his conduct, especially given Sarah's co-employment. Chad is temporarily suspended, and rumors begin to spread rapidly throughout the firm. Sarah is deeply mortified as her professional reputation suffers a significant blow. She confronts Hank enraged, accusing him of cruelty and manipulation. Hank calmly informs her that he is merely ensuring accountability for their actions. The affair quickly becomes pervasive office gossip, creating an unbearable atmosphere for Sarah. Chad's career prospects severely diminish, as he is now perceived as a professional liability. Hank secures a substantial portion of their joint assets through the final divorce settlement. Sarah is compelled to find a new apartment, unable to afford the marital home independently. Hank observes Sarah's struggles with a grim satisfaction, tinged with a persistent sadness. His co-workers offer discreet support, having previously noticed the evident marital tension. The divorce is officially finalized, awarding Hank the house and a clear financial future. After weeks of back and forth with Ms. Henderson, weighing the risks and rewards, I made the call. The anonymous tip to Chad's company's HR department went out, a carefully curated package of the incriminating emails, photos, and credit card statements. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about ensuring a consequence, a clear line drawn in the sand. Sarah had broken our marriage, and Chad had facilitated it. Now their professional lives would feel the tremors. The company launched an internal investigation. Given that Sarah was also employed there, albeit in a different department, it was a necessary step for them. Within days, I heard through the grapevine, a mutual contact, careful with their words, that Chad Olson had been temporarily suspended. The rumors, juicy and scandalous, began to circulate like wildfire through the firm. The hushed whispers in the hallways, the knowing glances, the sudden silence when certain names were mentioned. It was precisely what I had anticipated. Sarah, of course, was mortified. Her professional reputation, something she had meticulously cultivated, took a significant hit. The gossip, the judgment, the uncomfortable atmosphere. It all chipped away at her. She confronted me, her face flushed with fury, her eyes blazing. "You animal!" she shrieked, slamming her fist on the kitchen counter, rattling the ceramic salt shaker. "You cruel, manipulative bastard! You're trying to ruin my life!" I looked at her, my expression calm, almost detached. "No, Sarah," I said, my voice low and even. "I'm simply ensuring there are consequences for your actions. Both of yours. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." Her words were hot with anger, but they slid off me. The truth of what she'd done had built an armor around my heart. The affair became the dominant topic of office gossip, turning Sarah's once vibrant workplace into a suffocating environment. Every meeting, every casual conversation felt laced with unspoken judgment. Chad's career prospects, once bright for a young, ambitious guy, dimmed considerably. He was now seen as a liability, a loose cannon who couldn't be trusted, professionally or personally. The professional world, I knew, rarely tolerated such indiscretions without repercussions. The divorce proceedings, propelled by the weight of my evidence, moved towards a settlement that largely favored me. Ms. Henderson had been relentless. I secured a substantial portion of our joint assets, including a larger share of the house equity. Sarah, despite her lawyer's best efforts, found herself in a precarious financial position. She was forced to find a new apartment, a smaller, less grand place on the other side of town. The house, our house, the one we had picked out together, was mine. I saw her once, loading boxes into a U-Haul outside her new building. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped, none of the vibrant energy she had possessed when she was stepping out with Chad. A grim satisfaction settled in my gut, cold and sharp. But beneath it, a lingering sadness still flickered. This wasn't the life I'd wanted for either of us. My coworkers, who had quietly observed the growing tension in my marriage over the past few months, offered their own form of muted support. A pat on the back, an extra cup of coffee, a knowing nod. No explicit questions, just an understanding presence that acknowledged my pain without demanding I articulate it. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. The judge's gavel struck, a sharp, decisive sound, severing the last legal threads that bound us. I walked out of the courthouse, the crisp autumn air feeling different, lighter somehow. The house was mine, the financial path forward clear. The wounds were still fresh, but the bleeding had stopped. A new chapter, however uncertain, was finally beginning. Sarah, now facing severe financial and professional isolation, confronts difficult choices. She attempts to reconcile with Chad, who has become cautious and emotionally detached due to his own problems. Chad ultimately ends his relationship with Sarah, unwilling to risk further career or personal damage. Alone and desperate, Sarah tries to manipulate Hank, feigning regret and appealing to their past. Hank sees through her insincere attempts, recalling the profound depth of her betrayal. She begins spreading rumors about Hank's controlling nature and obsession. Hank ignores the gossip, steadfastly focusing on rebuilding his own life. Sarah escalates her actions, attempting to sabotage Hank's reputation through anonymous online posts. Hank's lawyer advises him on the possibility of legal action for defamation. He opts for a direct, yet legal strategy to counteract Sarah's smear campaign. Hank discreetly shares the genuine circumstances of their divorce with trusted colleagues, portraying himself as the injured party. Public opinion begins to shift against Sarah, who is increasingly viewed as unstable. Chad, now in a lower-paying job, expresses his regret to a mutual acquaintance, which eventually reaches Hank. With the divorce finalized, Sarah found herself in a tight spot, financially strained, forced into a small apartment, and professionally isolated within her firm. Her choices had narrowed considerably. She tried to patch things up with Chad, I heard, calling him, meeting him for coffee. But Chad, burned by the internal investigation and his temporary suspension, was now wary, his youthful confidence replaced by a defensive posture. The thrill of their affair had curdled into a bitter liability. It didn't last. A few weeks later, through the same grapevine that had carried news of Chad's suspension, I learned he had officially broken it off with Sarah. He wasn't willing to endure any further professional or personal fallout. He'd made his choice, and it was clear I was no longer worth the risk. The architect of her new life had abandoned her, leaving her utterly alone. Then came the calls. Sarah's number, blocked, but she found ways to leave voicemails, usually from burner phones. Feigned regret, appeals to our past, soft, tearful promises of change. Hank, please, I made a mistake. I miss you. We can fix this. The manipulation was transparent, a thin veil over her desperation. I remembered the depth of her betrayal, the cold words on that Tuesday night. The memory served as a shield, deflecting her attempts. I deleted the messages without listening past the first few seconds. When that didn't work, she escalated. Whispers started circulating, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Hank was controlling, obsessed. He couldn't let her go. He was vindictive. The gossip felt like flies buzzing around my head. I ignored it, focusing on my work, on the quiet routine of my newly solitary life in the house. The truth, I believed, would always outlast rumor. But Sarah wasn't done. Anonymous online posts started appearing on local forums, veiled accusations, thinly disguised references to my anger issues and jealousy. It was a smear campaign designed to erode my reputation, to turn public opinion against me. Ms. Henderson, when I brought it to her attention, looked grim. "This is defamation, Mr. Miller," she stated, her voice tight. "We can take legal action, but it will be messy and likely expensive." I considered it, the prospect of another legal battle, another public airing of our dirty laundry, but a direct lawsuit felt too much like feeding her need for drama. Instead, I decided on a different approach, more subtle but equally effective. I started talking, not gossiping, not accusing, but calmly, quietly, sharing the true circumstances of our divorce with a few trusted colleagues, a couple of close friends. I showed them the emails, the credit card statements, the documented proof of her affair. I presented myself as the wrong party, the one who had simply tried to defend himself against a betrayal and subsequent smear campaign. I didn't exaggerate. I simply laid out the facts, letting them draw their own conclusions. The tides of public opinion began to turn. Sarah's desperate attempts at damage control, her erratic behavior, and the blatant inconsistencies in her stories started to alienate even those who had initially sympathized with her. The image of the poor, wronged Sarah dissolved, replaced by a growing perception of a woman unraveling, desperate and untrustworthy. And Chad? The last I heard, through a mutual acquaintance, he was working at a lower-paying firm, having struggled to find a good position after the scandal. The acquaintance said he expressed regret, not just for his choices, but for the mess he'd created. Word got back to me, and it was a small, cold comfort, a confirmation that some actions did indeed carry lasting consequences. Sarah faces significant career repercussions, struggling to secure new employment in her field. She eventually loses her apartment and is compelled to move in with her parents in a small, out-of-state town. Chad Olson, having lost both his job and his professional reputation, departs the town, unable to restart his life there. Hank, despite his financial stability, still bears the deep emotional scars of the betrayal. He observes Sarah's downfall, the steep price she pays, yet finds no genuine joy in it. A chance meeting with Sarah's mother reveals Sarah's profound regret and overwhelming shame. Hank begins therapy, diligently processing the trauma of the affair and the subsequent divorce. He cautiously re-enters the dating scene, prioritizing authentic connection over an idealized partner. His network of friends and family provides essential, unwavering support during his recovery. The house, once a painful reminder of betrayal, slowly transforms back into a comforting home. Hank acknowledges that true healing requires him to relinquish any lingering desire for revenge. He contemplates the moral intricacies of his past actions, questioning if he had overstepped boundaries. The small-town community quietly discusses their downfall, serving as a cautionary tale. The price started to become clear. Sarah, unable to find new employment in her field, burned too many bridges, her professional reputation too tarnished by the gossip and the lingering questions. Her temporary roles dried up, and her savings, diminished by legal fees and a reduced divorce settlement, ran out. She lost her apartment, the one she'd moved into after leaving our house. The last I heard, she had moved back in with her parents, in a small town in rural Ohio, a place a million miles from the vibrant city life she'd once craved. Chad Olson, too, paid his dues. The lower-paying job hadn't lasted. The small town's professional network, though larger than I'd initially thought, was still tight-knit. His reputation, once spotless, was now marred by scandal. He packed his bags and left, vanishing from the local scene. I never heard where he went, only that he couldn't rebuild his life there. I was financially stable, the house was mine, and the divorce was finalized. But the emotional scars remain, deep and persistent. The anger had faded, replaced by a dull ache, a quiet emptiness where the certainty of a shared future used to be. I saw Sarah's fall from grace, the steep price she had paid, and while there was a grim satisfaction in the justice of it, there was no real joy. The bitterness of it all left a residue, a faint metallic taste in my mouth. One afternoon, I ran into Sarah's mother at the grocery store, an awkward encounter in the produce aisle. She looked older, her usually cheerful face etched with worry. We exchanged polite, strained greetings. Just as I was about to walk away, she lowered her voice. "Sarah's not doing well, Hank," she said, her eyes pleading for understanding. She regrets it all. She's so ashamed." The words hung there, a quiet confirmation of what I already knew. Shame, regret. It was a heavy burden, perhaps heavier than any legal judgment. That conversation was a turning point. I started therapy, something Earl had gently suggested. It wasn't about fixing Sarah, it was about fixing me, processing the trauma, the betrayal, the anger, the quiet despair. It was a slow, sometimes painful process, but it helped to untangle the knotted emotions, to separate my identity from the wreckage of the marriage. Cautiously, after a few months, I started dating again. Coffee dates, quiet dinners, no grand gestures, no whirlwind romances, just tentative conversations, seeking genuine connection rather than a manufactured perfection. It was different, slower, but felt more authentic.